30 Minutes of Faith. We're very happy to have Beth White with us from Our Lady of Assumption Parish and other Catholic places from the past that we'll talk about. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Tell our viewers where you were born and raised and where life started.
I was born in Denver, Colorado. My dad was in the Air Force, so we moved quite a bit. I've lived in a lot of different places in the United States. And when I got to school age, we settled in Southern California, and I've been in California ever since.
Are you old enough to remember? I mean, are you young enough then, old enough now to remember? Was that Lowry Air Force Base?
It was Lowry Air Force Base. I didn't remember it from the time, but I had an opportunity to go back and see where my first home, and that was kind of exciting. And I saw Lowry across the street.
I did 20 weeks of technical training at Lowry Air Force Base when I was 19 years old, and it holds a special place in my heart. We had some fun times learning some good stuff. So you've been here ever since adulthood?
Been in California ever since I was in elementary school, lived until I graduated from college, and then I moved north to the northern part of the state, and I've been in Northern California since then.
Raised in a Catholic religious home?
My mom is Catholic. My dad was not Catholic, but I was raised in a Catholic home. I went to Catholic elementary school and would have gone to Catholic high school, except where we were living at the time, the Catholic high school was a long bus ride away. So I spent my high school years in public school.
And your father was not opposed, it sounds like. Your mother would get the kids doing Catholic things, and that worked well?
Yeah, my dad was not opposed. He was raised in a Baptist environment, and neither my mom or my dad lived close to their families, and so they just embarked, on their own, and he had no objection to a Catholic environment.
Siblings?
I want to go back just a minute. I really view my dad as a very practicing Christian, and so it was not just a Catholic environment, but it was very Christian.
Good. Brothers and sisters?
I'm the oldest of four. My next sibling is a brother, and then I have two younger sisters.
And are they in California?
My brother is in Southern California. My sister spent a lot of her years in Alaska and recently moved to Boise, Idaho. And my youngest sister lives in Phoenix. And that's where my mom is right now.
I have four brothers and two sisters, and we're scattered all over creation like that. That's the way that works out.
Yes.
Now, I know that for a lot of years you worked for Catholic Charities. So let's talk about them for a minute. How did you come to that?
Well, I'd like to go back a little bit further. My original college training was in library science. And for a number of years I worked in a public library system. And then life happens, we moved, my children were born. When I needed to go back to work, there weren't library jobs to be had any place where we were living. And so my home church was going to take on its first paid staff person, a youth minister. And the pastor convinced me that I could do that. And so at that point, I figure I started my second career by default, working for the church. And so, but now, 27, almost 28 years later, I should stop talking about it as my career by default. I have a feeling that's where I was supposed to land all along.
Where are your children?
My daughter is living in New York City. She works for the Metropolitan Museum of Art.
Wow.
Great place to visit. My son is in the Air Force, and he is currently stationed just outside of London, but at the moment he's in the Middle East someplace.
And prayers ascend in his behalf regularly, I'll bet.
Yes, because when he's on deployment, I don't hear from him very often. So I'm always assuming that no news is good news.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So then how did you end up at Catholic Charities per se?
I would say, let's see, that was in the year 2000. 2000. My children had gone off to college. announced that they were never going to move back to the place where I was living, and so I thought it was an opportunity to move back to a city. I'm more of a big city person, and had the opportunity at that time to, there was an opening at Catholic Charities, and I was fortunate enough to be hired to do that. So I've been doing that, was doing that up until September of last year.
Now, Catholic Charities has done a gazillion things in a gazillion places.
Yes.
For a gazillion reasons.
Uh-huh.
Can you give us an example of just some of the things that unfolded while you worked there? Just an example of something good that may have benefited a large group or a small group?
Yeah, like you said, Catholic Charities is one of the largest social service providers in the United States. But narrowing it back down to the local level, there were a lot of good things that happened. I'd say everything that Catholic Charities does is good. Maybe I'm biased, but whether it is helping a family stay in their apartment because one or more of the parents have lost a job, or helping a young person with an immigration issue so that they can go to college, or helping an older person improve their life so that they can continue living independently. You know, all those kinds of programs were something that I've been lucky to be a part of.
Now, is Catholic Charities assigned by diocese?
Yes. I would say across the United States, most Catholic Charities organizations are affiliated with their home diocese.
And you've worked some with Father Kiernan, who's a board member, a great friend.
Yes. Actually, for all the years I've worked in the church, I've worked for Father Kiernan. He's been my supervisor, and I have to say I've learned a great deal from him.
I'm never going to forget into the eternities that I said to him one day, "Do you look like your father did?" We were talking about Father, and he said, "I do. He was a handsome man." I laughed and laughed. What keeps you motivated to keep going and doing well and doing good? Is it the Christian upbringing, or more than that?
Well, I think it's a lot of things. The Christian upbringing is one of the things. I remember my mom asking me a number of years ago, "Why do you keep doing this work?" And I just looked at her, and I don't know where this came from, but I said, well, it was all the years of you telling me what it was like to grow up in the Depression, and how your mother and your family took in people in rural North Dakota off the train to feed them and house them because they had no place else. And I think that is part, I just feel like it's in my bones. But the other thing is the one-to-one contact. I really think that, everything we do makes a difference in a person's life, or has the potential to do that. And so everything that I do, or everything what keeps me going is knowing that whatever contact I have with people, might have some benefit to them down the road.
Might lighten the load.
Might lighten the load.
Okay, let's talk about North Dakota.
And actually, in the interim, it it becomes such a gift to me. That saying of you always get more than you give, and I always think I go into things, the helping people, with the idea of helping people, but I'm always so surprised at what a gift it is to me. Coming back.
I'm glad to hear you say that. I want to talk about North Dakota. Is this the place that your kids said they were never going to go back there to live?
No, this is the place that all of us said we were never going to go to live.
And it's where? I know North Dakota, so I want to talk to you about it.
Well, Eccleston, North Dakota, Valley City, North Dakota. I never lived there myself, but my mom left when she was in college. She migrated to Montana, and that's where she met my dad, and they were off and running from there. So she spent her childhood there, but never went back.
Well, for 3 years, I worked in a base that was assigned missile silos at Minot.
Yeah.
And so we traipsed all over the place. And people would say to me, those that come to North Dakota to stay are the fittest of the fit, and you know, they can survive. And sure enough, winters were most interesting. But we found North Dakota filled with hardworking, terrific people, and they were either Catholic or they were Lutheran.
That's exactly right.
That's what they were, you know.
That's what they were. And my
And,
mom's family happened to be Catholic, and
we really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Had a great time.
Yeah, and you know, the survival concept, you know, they were farmers, and you know, one year you could have a good crop and the next year you might not. And the culture of helping people, of helping your neighbors and being part of a community, I think that I did learn that, and I saw it in action, you know, going back from time to time to visit my mom's family. And you just see that in the neighborhood, in the community, and you know, we'd be out visiting people, and you'd see somebody on a tractor on a farm, and they'd point out the person and say, okay, that's so-and-so, and these were their parents, and this was their connection to us. And I think the connection that people have in an environment like that really rubbed off on me.
And North Dakota now has an oil and natural gas boom that's
Yes, they
going
do.
like crazy. A friend of mine in the military about 5 years ago bought a motorhome. He had never owned one before, and drove up to North Dakota to Bottineau to see what was going up there, because they'd set up some sort of a big trailer park. And he discovered in a day or two that everybody wanted satellite TV. So he drove into Bismarck or somewhere, and he found a company, and he said, you know, I can be your installer and, you know, all those other things if you'll be the distributor. So he parked his motorhome, had to go back and get a truck, brought a truck up, and so he and his wife live in the motorhome about 3 weeks out of the year, and he installs. Then the other week they dash back to the Denver and Salt Lake area where their kids and their grandkids are. And I said to him not long ago, so it's been 5 years, how much longer are you going to do that? And he says, this is the best job I've ever had. I'll keep doing it as long as they need it. And you know, they don't even have enough, they don't even have enough apartments, and in many cases not even enough restrooms and things for all the people who are working there. And that's a far cry from North Dakota, you know, in the 60s sort of thing.
Yes. Yeah.
Jumping ahead, how'd you end up at OLA after all the years at Catholic Charities?
Well, before I worked at Catholic Charities, I worked in, you know, a small community in Northern California, in a local parish, like I said, and I really was starting to miss the rhythm of parish life. And really, you know, the older I get, you know, the more I was looking to that. And the opportunity came up to work with Father Kiernan again, and I just couldn't, it was too good an offer, I just couldn't pass it up.
No, I don't blame you.
Yeah.
How was the school going there?
Oh, the school is great. Boy, the students there, the instilling of the faith, and you know, their Christian service, it's just great to see that in young people.
Now, some of the Catholic schools in the United States have closed, I think, in the last 10 or 20 years. Has that slowed now, or is it still a concern? Are you aware of?
Yeah, I know, in fact, in our diocese, there have been schools that have been consolidated. That so far has not happened in Carmichael, and hopefully won't. Yeah, I'd say that maybe it has slowed.
Good.
Yeah.
I hope it will.
Yeah.
That's a nice campus.
Because it's a good, it's really a good environment. It's family-centered. It's, you know,
it's safe.
Jesus-centered.
Yeah.
It's safe.
Right.
It's a community. It's that the school and the church community is very strong. There are people there that have lived there for generations, and I meet people, and they're either moving back because they went to school there, or their parents went to school there, or they taught there, or there's some connection. And people, I think people these days are really looking for that quality of connection. And we see it all the time there, that people are moving back because they had such a good experience there.
And what are you doing specifically at Our Lady of Assumption?
Well, my title is Pastoral Associate. You know, in the former days of the church, there would be multiple priests in a parish, and of course that reality has changed quite a bit. And so I am doing what would have been done by an associate pastor at one point, working with people on baptism preparation, working with adults who are looking for a faith experience, doing some administration, but mostly, on the ground with people.
A year or two ago at St. Francis, I attended a baptism. Little girl, little boy, both of them 9 months old, I'll say, or a year old. The little girl just thought she was the star of the show, and she just did everything. You couldn't have scripted it better. The little boy was, what are you doing with me here? And I got to get out of this place as fast as I can. A couple of weeks later, I went down to OLA, and Father Kiernan was performing some baptisms, and one of the little girls was 3 or 4, and then a couple of the other kids, I took it from what I could hear, the family had come into the area, and she hadn't been baptized yet, and they wanted her to be. And then they had these 3 or 4 other little kids, and it was interesting to watch the love of the parents and the uncles and the aunts and the grandparents, and in a couple of instances older siblings, and how important that was to the family thing. So that whole family structure in our churches is going really, really well. Do you at OLA do very much outreach to other faiths?
Well, Father Kiernan, as you know, is the ecumenical and interfaith officer for the diocese, so he has so many connections, with other faiths. We actually this year invited other denominations to join us for an Ash Wednesday service, and we had a couple of pastors that took us up on that. And in talking with them, they would like to do more of that, and would like to, have our people, come together on, a regular basis, because there's a lot of work that we can do together. None of us can do all the work ourselves.
Exactly.
And we depend on each other to do that. And so I think that there will be more of that outreach from Our Lady of the Assumption, in that. We met a pastor of a church that's very close to us, and we had not known him before. And so I think that's something that we're going to pursue. The other thing is there are a lot of people, out in the communities these days who are unchurched, and we have a lot of interest in just reaching out in general. To people even in our neighborhood. We're located right in a neighborhood, and there are homes all around us, and we know that there are people there who maybe don't have a church home, and you never know, might be looking for something. So I think that we'll be doing some outreach to
It's a nice campus and a nice setup. I mean, it's a really good location. For me, I think it's really seated in a fine place. Will your children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren and great-great-grandchildren be Catholic?
I would hope so, but I don't know that for sure. Kids go away from their faith foundation.
They do.
What my goal always was to give them a foundation, and that if they went away from that, they would have a place to either come back to or to go from. And my son, for example, this was a few years ago, he was stationed in Germany at the time and was going through a little rough patch. And he called me out of the blue one day and said, why did I leave the church? And I said, oh, Aaron, you didn't leave the church, you just stopped going. And he said, oh,
Good
so
answer.
that's so great, because he had just gotten connected with a chaplain, a military chaplain that he really connected with, and has been back going to church ever since.
That's a good answer.
And so I always counsel people, especially if they're bringing a child for baptism, that the parents are the first and most important educators of their children, and those are the people that pass on the faith, and we just help them do that, but it's their role to do that. And that it's really important to give kids a foundation, because I run across adults all the time who have had no foundation because the parents thought they were going to do them a favor by not giving them anything so they could choose when they got old enough to choose. And then they had nothing, they had no context. and all they knew was that they were looking for something. They didn't know what it was until they happened to meet somebody who was a member of a church, or was related to somebody, married into a family, and
See it all the time.
yeah. So what I hope for my own children is that I was able to give them enough of a foundation that they, and I see them, I see them doing things that tell me that it's in them, whether they are part of a formal church community or not. They have Christian beliefs, and they have a sense of service to their brothers and sisters.
Pope Francis has really extended the love and family and goodness and
Yes.
and the least among us, and
Oh,
you know,
yes.
that whole viewpoint, very very impressive and very pleasing.
Yeah, Bishop Soto tells the story. He was in Rio for World Youth Day, and he kind of jokes about one of the events. He said, I'm there on the beach at Copacabana with 3 million of the Pope's closest friends. And he talks about Pope Francis speaking to the young people on the beach, gathered on the beach. But surrounding that are high-rise hotels, fancy hotels. And when all of this was going on the beach, you could see people in the hotels on their balconies. And Pope Francis told the young people, pointing to those balconies, you can't balconize your faith. You can't keep it in the balconies. You have to bring it to the beach. You have to bring it to the ground, and you have to walk the talk, and you have to be, you have to be working with the people. And he tells that to people, just regular people, but he also tells it to the clergy and to his bishops, that you need to get out there and be with the people. You can't be, keeping that faith to yourself. So it's a very inspiring, to me anyway, it's very inspiring, to have that leadership.
I haven't talked to a Catholic yet who wasn't just really thrilled with him, who just feel like, and there was no reflection on Benedict or anyone else.
Oh, no.
They just think Francis is just a wonderful, wonderful soul.
Well, you hear this in other contexts, but you also see it with the Pope. When you've seen one Pope, you've seen one Pope. They all bring something to the church, and they're elected through the guidance of the Holy Spirit, and so there's something that the church needs that they, in particular, can do. And you have seen that, in all of our recent popes anyway, that each one has brought something that the church seems to need at the time. And, whether it's the intellectual style of Pope Benedict, which was so great, Pope John Paul II, his love of young people, or Pope Francis, who, is down there with the poor and marginalized. They all bring something different, that we need to hear.
I read a day or two ago that some film company was going to show a movie about Christ in a soccer stadium in Central America somewhere, I think it was. I'm sorry, I've forgotten where that was. But he said, somebody said, well, you can't get 60,000 people to come to the movies. And he said, well, if we can't get them to come to see Jesus in Central and South America, we can't get them to come anywhere. And then the next night they had 68,000 people. And they had 14 big screens set up, and then the sounds, and and at the end when they played the credits, they were showing some other pictures and things. Everybody just sat dead quiet, like they were right in church. They wanted to see who had been responsible, and they wanted to see the little outtakes and things. And then when it ended, they just burst into applause and cheered and screamed and whistled and shouted, and sort of brought the soccer arena into play. And that was just kind of a refreshing thing to read. I thought that's just very, very cool.
Yeah, I had an experience like that. I took high school students to World Youth Day when it was in Denver. And we were at Mile High Stadium.
Yes.
The stadium was packed, and they were showing, it was Pope John Paul II at the time, on the big screen.
Right.
They were showing him.
Jumbotron.
Yeah, and they were showing him in the helicopter landing, and getting into his car that he was coming over. And they started with their feet, and the stadium was just shaking. you know, with this anticipation, and to see young people, so many young people considering themselves part of something bigger, and to be cheering, you know, for a religious figure and not a sports figure or a music figure, you know, it's just inspiring that that is still possible today.
I thought it was really cool. They, you know, those people in the soccer stadium were cheering for God. We don't do that much, you know. We bow our heads and we pray and we're quiet and we're try to be humble and decent, but we don't get to cheer much. And so when it is the Pope or whatever, boy, that's a great reason to stand up and cheer and let it rock and roll.
Yeah.
That's fun.
Yes.
Do you think the youth of today in the Catholic Church will continue on?
I do. I think that it may not be the way we envision it, but I think they do. I think they want that. I think they see that. Of course, not everybody.
Of course.
But I really believe that the power of young people is there and the idealism, you know, to change our world, to do something important, to do something meaningful, you know, for other people. I think that is there.
I said to a religious leader a week ago, do you think the second coming is close? And he said, I don't know. I don't think about it much. I'm thinking about, you know, building up and, you know, encouraging and uplifting and all those other sorts of things.
Yes.
Well, we're drawing to a close, so I want to ask you one last question, and that is this, that if you could wave a magic wand to fix or repair or improve or change something in the world, what would that do? What would it be?
Oh, it would be great if everybody, no matter what the circumstances, could be seen as a child of God, and that no matter who we look at, we see the image and likeness of God. And I really wish that could happen.
I hope it will. It's what we're
I
working
hope it
for.
will.
It's what we're all trying for.
It is.
Thank you.
Thank
very,
you.
very much. Nice
Thank
to
you.
visit with you. Glad you'd be here.
Thank you.
Okay, take care.